Alchemists, I just finished recording this episode with Brittany, and I know you're going to love the conversation that we have. We unpack everything from burnt out leaders, burnt out teachers, how to try to address those things, how to bring about change within an organization, one that you're already in or one that you're getting picked up and moved over to and put down in. So you're going to want to check out the full episode and stay tuned to the very end where we answer a listener's question. And stay tuned to the very end where we answer one of your listeners' questions.
Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator. And now your host, Tyler Comeau.
Oh, what do they say in Texas?
Y'all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. What is your school's podcast on?
Anywhere you can listen. I don't know what platform they use to get it all
distribute.
Done.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I should know more, but I don't. I just know that I listen to it, and it's very cute.
What do they talk about?
So this week, their podcast is over the TikTok band.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's really interesting because you would think middle schoolers sometimes, can be very,
Yep.
It's so stupid. Like, that's not cool. But they had some really insightful things to say. So they always surprise me. Yeah.
That's awesome.
For better or worse.
If you want to plug it at the end, by all means, take some time or even throughout the show. Feel free to talk about it.
Cool. Yeah,
all right.
I will.
I'm going to kick us off here. Before I do that, though, Brittany, can I get you, this is just for my thumbnail shot, can I get you to look to your right and just say, hello, my name is Brittany.
Okay. Hello, my name is Brittany.
And like a full-on turn to this way.
Great. Yeah. Okay. And say, hello, my name is Brittany.
That's actually perfect, just what you did. Because what I'm going to do, I'm going to clip me going this way and saying, hello, my name is Tyler. And it's just a still image, but it's going to look like we're having a conversation this way.
Cool.
So
okay.
There we go. Okay, I'm going to get us started.
Okay.
Let me change one thing here. Alchemists, welcome to episode 54 of the Elemental Educator Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler, and thank you so much for joining our community for another incredible connection. If you're here for the first time, welcome to a place where we redefine leadership and challenge the status quo. Take a minute before continuing the episode to subscribe to our YouTube at Elemental_Educator, where we upload all of our videos and additional leadership content meant for anyone looking to grow. For those returning alchemists, take some time to expand our community and share this platform with one other person today. I'm so thankful for your passion and dedication to being better together. Now get ready to let the alchemy of education ignite your passion for learning. Today, I'm thrilled to connect with Brittany Thompson, an educator from East Texas with over 16 years of experience, including 8 years in administration. She's passionate about fostering positive campus culture and climate. She is dedicated to creating thriving school environments where students and staff can succeed. Welcome to the Elemental Educator Podcast, Brittany. It is a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here.
And before we jump in, this is podcast number 1 for Brittany. This is your first podcast.
Yes, it is.
Hoping to make it fun, hoping to make it lively. This is a video podcast, so you're actually getting 2 for 1 here. You're getting the audio and the video podcast at the end of it. Now, right before we pressed record, though, you shared that your school has a podcast.
They do. I have a group of 7th and 8th graders that have started a content creation class this year, and they have a podcast and a blog. So I don't have it right off the top of my head, but I will link it on my Instagram.
Yeah, and we'll link it into the description of the show notes of this episode so people can go check it out if they want to. And at the point of this conversation, when this episode's released, unfortunately, TikTok will already have been banned, maybe saved. Who knows where it's going to be? But their recent conversation that they're unpacking with you right now is the ban of TikTok. Now, I got incredibly off topic here, so I want to start with the big question for us, which is, how did you get to where you are now, Brittany?
So I taught choir and elementary music for almost 10 years. It was about 8. But I remember, this is horrible to admit, but one year I worked for an administration that was less than stellar. And I'd been itching to get out of the classroom and do my next step, but I knew it needed to be in education. And I just remember one moment in particular, I thought, yeah, this is the time, because teachers need more support than that. And so it just kind of lit a fire in me to jump in with both feet, and the rest is history. Here I am.
There we go. Now, before you even got into education, let's go all the way back to that. What was
All the way back.
driving moment, like 4 years, right? What was the driving moment that made you want to even get into the field?
I was a junior in high school. I remember because before then I wanted to do something medical, which anybody who knows me would laugh at that. Like, it doesn't seem like I truly am made to do this. But I was in choir class and my choir director said, how awesome is my job that I get to sit here and listen to students sing to me all day. And I just remember thinking, well, yeah, this music at that moment was my passion. That's what I love to do. So why wouldn't I go into that and want to ignite that passion in other students? So that's really what pushed me to get into music education.
Love that. And the segue into leadership, like you said, you saw a problem, you wanted to help be a part of the solution to it. So it drove you towards that, which is so great to hear and sets us up for success to really get into what we value, which brings us to the first segment of our show. Rooted in wisdom, driven by purpose. Welcome to Grounded Moments. And to build some momentum here, I want to start by asking you, what's one thing grounding you in what you're doing now?
My passion to serve. And that's for both students and teachers. That's just really when I make decisions every day, that's where I go to. Is this best for teachers? Is this best for students?
Great questions to ask, even outside of education, just as a general CEO manager. Is this best for our organization? Is this best for the people I oversee? And then try to make those decisions around that. Now, before the show, I asked you to provide a quote that resonates with you. And the quote you chose is, "To whom much is given, much is required," Luke 12:48. Can I get you to break down how you found this quote and why you picked it?
Sure. So I am a person of faith. My faith is another thing that is very essential to me. And I found this quote again. Well, I was probably in college when it started really sinking in. In high school, things are kind of surface. But at that moment, I was about to graduate. And I just remember thinking, man, I'm going to have a classroom of, I'm a music teacher. So I have at any point like 50 kids in a classroom. But my impact is the entire campus. That's huge. And I just felt like to be entrusted with those students and with the knowledge that I'd be giving them meant that I needed to pay a lot of attention to my craft and to my practice in the field. So I took it very seriously. And it's just rolled right with me going into leadership with teachers on our campus. Again, I've been impacted in many different ways as a teacher. And so as a leader, I try to reflect on that and realize that I'm not dealing with just school district employees. I'm dealing with people. And so I have been entrusted to lead a group of people who are leading our greatest asset in the world, which is our children. So that's why.
And it's a great quote to bring in and to live by. And you kind of answered the next question, which is how does it show up in your workflow there? What I want to go into is in public systems, Catholic systems, depending on which system you're in, this quote can carry extra weight to it. In a public setting, how do you tiptoe the line then of bringing in potentially a religious quote to then push an action within your organization?
Yeah. So I am in East Texas and we are still very much, there are certain things that I cannot say to students. And there are definitely times that I will let my teachers know, like, if I feel like I need to pray about something, I'm respectful of what their beliefs are. And it's definitely not anything that I'm forcing people to do. But I do think that at the heart of a lot of our literature, at the heart of a lot of our wisdom is the Bible. And so if you need to view it as a piece of literature, then that's what some people do. But I have a lot of teachers that work for me that are people of faith. And so I think it resonates. Like you said, it's a good quote, whether you read it as something faith-based or not, but it does resonate differently for people with faith. We are in the Bible Belt. And so that is something that's not as taboo in this part of the country as it is in other parts of the country. But I still am very careful to respect those around me. I'm not ignorant to think that everybody believes the same way that I do, and I would never want to make anybody feel uncomfortable. So that's kind of how I try to approach that.
And standing aside, if it wasn't cited, the words on it are just as important in what it's asking us to action, right? Which is what you've alluded to, which is great to see. Right. Brittany, have you heard of an elevator pitch before?
I have.
Okay. So again, 10 to 20 second pitch here. Your idea on this quote, how it should be getting actioned. the valid message behind it that you value. And we're going to see how we do. So whenever you're ready, sell us.
You're going to time me?
Well, I'm not going to run a timer. Maybe I should in
good.
this segment though. Well, now you got me thinking maybe I should add an animation.
That adds a level of pressure.
Yeah, a whole level of pressure to it. So
yes,
let's hear your pitch on why people should be valuing this and consider it important.
So I believe that people deserve the basic right that humans get, which is, tolerance and decency. Like, we're going to treat each other the way we wanted to be treated, which is pulling another Bible verse in there. However, it's important when making decisions that you consider those around you and the impact that those decisions are going to have. And so if I'm given much, which is the leadership of a school, then much will be required of me to handle that school, those people, the children, the adults, with care. How did I do?
Great. I didn't even start my timer. I just wanted to listen to what you had to say, and it was powerful and it was awesome. And it brings me back to a quote of, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's very similar to whom much is given, much is required.
Yes.
And the action behind it, it's just a good reminder to anybody in any position, whether you're a teacher, a leader, a CEO of an organization, a manager, a parent in any way, shape, or form, right? You have much given to you. So you are required to give much back, right? And return that. And that's where we go from there. Now, along the way of having to action that, there is going to be some adversity along the way where we're going to lean on this quote, which brings us to our next segment of Headwinds and Tailwinds. Through storms and surges, discover the lessons from Headwinds and Tailwinds, where we focus on the challenge that tests us and the forces that help us move forward. So let's set the stage here. And can you share a time where you faced a piece of significant adversity?
Sure. I have a couple that come to mind. One specifically as an administrator was when I walked into my first principalship position. Love the district that I'm in. It's a great school, but we were walking in. The state of Texas rates your schools once you get your accountability turned in. And this particular school was rated an F. And so walking into, which was a sudden, I think, how did you say it? Did it feel like it was a sudden storm or a slow buildup? It was a sudden storm.
Is it like an A to F scale?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it didn't go all the way to Z. So F was the low of the low. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I have other opinions about that, but you didn't ask me yet. So it was a sudden storm for me. But I became quickly aware that it was a slow build for the campus. And so that was something where this quote, again, came into play, knowing that I was about to lead a group that was in the middle of their storm. A lot of them felt very defeated. A lot of them felt very discouraged. Their principal was not there anymore, which was heartbreaking for many of them. So I was walking into a touchy situation at best.
Now, would you have felt if the script was flipped, if it was an A-rated school, would you feel like there was more given? Or is that a situation where you're perceiving it as less given? Because I'm interpreting this as with an F-rated school, there's much more given. There's much more responsibility here. But the flip argument could be made as, hey, we're already just an F school. We can
only go up.
Yeah.
So actually, the school that I'm at now, I walked into an A. Pressure's completely different. Completely different. The thing with walking into a school where teachers are doubting themselves is that you have to, as a leader, number one, try to figure out where the breakdown is without offending anybody or devaluing anybody, but then also restoring a bit of confidence in their abilities. Spoiler alert, we did not stay in F after that year. We made a lot of great gains, and it was the same teachers that I started with. And so they had it. They knew what needed to happen. There were many factors at play there that I won't get into to protect people. But when you get to that point where you start doubting what your calling is, that's heavy. That's heavy. So on that side of it, it was a lot more difficult to walk into a situation like that. When you're walking into an A campus, which is the campus that I'm on now and love dearly, then you're walking into and thinking like, man, if I make any changes and then it goes down, like, have I wrecked this school? So it's different kind of pressure. But when you're handling fragile people, I feel like that's a little bit more heavy.
Right. And it's difficult to walk into that situation. You mentioned it yourself, and balance between wanting to build a positive relationship and, to put it bluntly, also acknowledging that this kind of sucks right now and something needs to change.
Right.
And then to bring about that change, it can't just come from you. And how do you get that ownership? You've clearly found the magic. And Brittany, there's a book in the works here by you, I feel, that could talk about, from F to A and see what it looks like. And in that book, you could unpack this whole grading system. That's a big flaw in itself. So
Yes.
With that, though, you mentioned in that year, you were able to turn that school around. What was a pivotal turning point where things started to shift?
So I was so lucky that year to be able to bring my assistant principal that was with me at the campus before. So we already had some chemistry going, which I think was great. Like, we had a very strong leadership team, but we decided that summer, as we were planning for the school year, that we were going to focus on 3 things throughout the year. And that was it. We were just going to drive those 3 things. And so student culture, we looked at successful student outcomes, and then teacher morale. So what does the student community look like? How do the students interact with each other? What can we do to build community amongst the kids? Because discipline was a little bit of an issue walking in. And then with the successful student outcomes, it was like, let's get back to basics. Let's figure out what works for these guys. Let's figure out where our teachers are strong and just lean in there. I think a lot of times in education, there are so many new, latest and greatest, that things get lost in translation. And we forget what our bread and butter is, which is building relationship with kids and then leaning into the content. Let's just get back to basics. So we tried to pull a lot off them that they had in years prior. And then the last one, I'm trying to make sure I didn't already, staff morale. Which, there's a lot of little taglines out there. Morale is more than Sonic drinks. But I'm going to tell you right now, Sonic drink does a lot for a teacher in the middle of the day. So we tried to plan some really uplifting things, but then also we tried to be really intentional with the conversations after evaluations, or just in the hallway or in the break room, just spending time validating them and what they brought to our team and what they brought to these students. And that year we made a C, and then the next year we were a B, and then I moved campuses. But I'm extremely proud of the staff and what they were able to accomplish just in that year. But yeah, we overcomplicate it too many times.
Absolutely, we do. And one thing that I love about the province that I'm in is we have a teacher quality standard, leader quality standard, superintendent leadership quality standard. And the first standard, no matter where you are on that journey, is effective relationships. Mm-hmm. And it brings it back to the root of, you should be putting these first beyond anything mm-hmm. else. Because if you don't have a connection, you're not going to make any progress with anything that you're trying to do. So I love that you're sharing that as well, and that it's not just here. Although what is just there is Sonic. We don't have Sonics here. I can't bring somebody their Sonic drink. We can bring them a Tim Hortons. We can bring them a Starbucks. So, we got some things that kind of work for us in our way. Same general idea. Yeah,
same
definitely.
Idea.
Might not be as good, though. I might have to try out a Sonic one day.
It's sugar in the middle of the day. That's the bottom line.
There you go. Jam-packed. Now, with this, though, we talk about this movement and this incredible feat of turning around an entire organization and a system behind it. That's not all sunshine and rainbows, because there probably were days where you're questioning if what you're doing is right. There's moments of frustration. What helped anchor you and stay grounded during that adversity? What was kind of the wind at your back?
So I think anybody, and it probably is way expanded than just to education, but anybody in this field, especially in the administration field, you need to have a circle of people that either are doing the same thing you're doing or have done what you're doing, just are really close. And I love the social media community. I think it's great, but I have a circle of friends. There are 4 of us, and all 4 of us have been in administration, some up to superintendent, and one is a school counselor, and we've all been in the administration role. They're not in my district. And so I feel like I can be candid with them. You have to be careful when you're talking to people who are in the same area you are, especially when you're needing to vent or bounce ideas about different things. So I think it's really important to build a very close community of people that know your heart and know your vision and are there to champion that with you, but are also there to say, hey, you need to rethink that. Like, let's take a moment, because on those days where I'm feeling extremely frustrated, I might say something to them that they're like, no, yeah, I get it. Don't say that out loud in front of your staff. And I need that. I need somebody to check me on that sometimes, because, you know, there are really frustrating moments. There are very low moments where it just kind of feels like, geez, can I do anything right in this moment? Like, or have I just completely dug this hole a little bit deeper? So I think that's a very important piece of success in leadership, is your circle.
That's such a strong message to send as well. And as a leader anywhere, if you can establish it where the people that you work with allow you to be a part of that circle and show that vulnerability with you as the leader, man, have you ever created an effective system, right?
Right.
I'm so thankful to have a space where people that I collaborate with are people that I also work with as well. And we can openly bounce these ideas off of each other, knowing that, hey, we are here and aligned to the same goal, which is something you said earlier. How are we putting kids first? How are we putting staff first? Outside of education, how are you putting whatever your organization's goal is first? And when that's what the conversation is aligned to, you can be vulnerable, blunt, and open with the people you work with, because you're trying to align to that same vision.
Right.
So for people facing their own headwinds, what's one thing they can do to move forward despite whatever adversity or storm they could be facing?
I would say to take a moment. My dad used to say, like, don't let the bird build a nest. So like, if you have a lot going on, take a moment to ground yourself in what truth is. And then remember what your purpose is. Remember your why. We hear that all the time. But listen, it's really true. When you're in the middle of a lot, whether it's a lot of good things happening that's just really stressful or requires a lot of your mental energy, or it's a more heavy, discouraging moment, to sit down and then be reflective of, okay, why did we start? Where are we going? And what is our purpose? Like, just take a moment to yourself. It'll all still be there when you walk out of your office or when you come back to work the next day. Everything's still going to be there. I just think that sometimes we try to move too fast. That would be my number one piece of advice, is just remember what your initial purpose was. Did it get lost in the middle of all of this? And how do we realign ourselves back to it?
And taking that moment, hoping sometimes things go away, doesn't always work.
It doesn't.
And you're right, you do come back to that. But that actually brings us to the next segment, which, after we face this adversity, how do we action our change? Small shifts, big waves. This is Ripples of Change, where we dive into the power of embracing change and making waves that last. So, Brittany, along the way, we've talked about things that you've put in place to make change. What's one of the recent changes that you've either led or embraced?
So here at the middle school, coming from elementary, one of the things that I noticed about secondary is that our MTSS, or response to intervention, RTI system, it's hard to implement. You know, at elementary level, you have about 90 to 120 minutes of a block to work with these same kids. Middle school, man, you're running 47 minutes in and out. So how do we do small group? Is that even reasonable? How do we serve students that are at tier 2 or tier 3 or are on a lower grade level than where they actually are? How do we meet those needs? And so that is a change that I started implementing last year. It is a slow and steady change, because one thing I am extremely aware of is how much we are asking our teachers to do. And I don't want to add anything to that. I can't think of a teacher on my campus right now that is not already serving all of their students. This kind of goes into, okay, what's the next step? How do we go deeper? How do we push that kid who's right there? How do we take time to address that need when we have 21 others? Our classes here run about 21 students at the max. We have, which I'm learning is a pretty reasonable ratio compared to some other schools. I know I had a teacher come in from out of state that said she served, this was in another district, but she served like 42 students in a classroom at one time. That's insane. So we thankfully are able to keep it at 21 or below. It's still a lot of kids and it's still a lot of content, when you have standardized testing breathing down your neck and you want to make sure that you're not teaching a test, you want to teach children. That's what their passion is. So we're trying to basically develop the plane while it's flying, of how do we make this work for us, for this campus. And there have been some moments where I can see the stress fall, but we're getting there. We're not there yet, but we're getting there.
One of the things you said earlier was that it was a slow process and a slow change. One of the great and actually incredible things about a slow process and a slow change is that it usually leads to consistency and it leads to something that's going to stick after. And it actually becomes a part of the school culture. Those quick and sudden changes, sometimes needed and sometimes very good and powerful. But usually after a very quick change, it's very tough to stay consistent with that quick change because now all of the questions, all of the pushback, and you keep hitting this vicious cycle where if you can approach something slow, prolonged over time, that's how you start to build it into culture. That's how you start to infuse it into something that's going to be everlasting. And speaking of that, though, with change, there's usually two key moments, which is that first step you take to make a change and the final move that makes it stick. With this being a slow change for you, what was the first step that you've taken to address improving MTSS?
So we met as a staff and we started with just our reading and math teachers. And so we looked at, because it was important for me to make it sustainable. That was one of the first things that I look at when I'm implementing anything. It's like crash dieting, right? It'll never last if it's too extreme. So I wanted it to be sustainable, but I also wanted it to be aligned with our district. I don't want us to do all this work here at the middle school and then high school has a completely different thing. And then those kids get lost again when they get over there, or same for elementary. They've done all of this work and now we're doing different. We have to reinvent the wheel. So we did a lot of work figuring out what it is that elementary is doing, what program they're using. Our region service center, which is kind of in Texas, we serve under the Texas Education Agency, and every region has their own service center, and they have a program that houses all the documentation for MTSS or RTI. So we took some time last year getting to know the ins and out of that side of the program, of how we're going to be documenting. Because like I said, most of my teachers were already serving those kids. It's just, I want to have a way to follow them and to make sure that they continue being served when they go to the next grade level and the next grade level. So that was the first step, was really committing as a group to, okay, this is the piece that we feel like we're missing. Now let's figure out how to find it and make it work for us. So that's been the part that's taken the longest is, documentation takes a lot of time and I don't want to monopolize their conference time, asking them to do all of this documentation. We're just troubleshooting and figuring out as we go. But that was the initial all right, we know we're doing this. Now, how can we add this to it and make it sustainable?
And with that, it's a great idea. And to hopefully build some momentum around it. Usually along the way, there are some unexpected setbacks. What was one ripple effect within it that you didn't see coming?
So because I was coming from the elementary school, I kind of expected it to be an easy sell, and it wasn't. And if any of my current teachers listen to this, they will agree with me. But I think it's because initially they felt like it was going to be a very huge undertaking. And I'll be honest, at times it has felt that way. So last year, we just played around with the documentation of things. And just doing that, I think, brought new ideas to teachers' mind of, this is how I can serve this group of students during this time, and made it more meaningful to them. They're more intentional with that. This year, we were able to implement 2 new positions where they specifically focus on that part of it, the documentation part of it, so the teachers aren't doing all the heavy lifting on their own. Right. That was something that I saw, honestly, back in April. I thought, man, if we're going to keep this moving at all, I'm going to have to take some of the weight off of them because it's just a lot. So that's kind of how we have solved that problem. And now we're just continuing on with what the consistency is going to look like over time, how we're going to create it, make it become part of our culture and expectations on campus.
It's like you read my mind on my next question here that I'm bringing up, because we just talked about the prolongment leading to culture, hopefully infusing it in. And people often worry that change won't last. And I'm almost positive, even you as a leader, myself as a leader, there's things that we dream of doing and we start them and we go, I wonder if this is going to stick around and how can I make it stick around? What steps are you taking to make sure that this is actually something that is being infused into this culture?
Well, we're doing, my assistant principal and I try to get out in the hallway, in the classrooms as much as we can. And so we see this in action, and the ability to be able to pinpoint it with certain teachers, like, no, that's all I'm asking for. Like, you're already doing it. I think that was a big aha for some of them last year. My thing is, I know that if it's going to have the legs it needs to keep going, it's going to have to feel natural. And so just continuing to tweak along the way, I think, is what it's going to take to make it just part of who we are. We're going to continue to refine. And before we know it, we're just adjusting what the norm is. And so that's the hope. I initially gave myself 3 years. Like, we're going to make this happen. So when a new teacher comes on my campus in 3 years, this is going to be part of the conversation with them. It's like this, and it'll be a norm for the rest of my staff. And so it'll be easy for them to talk about when they're able to communicate it with those who don't know, who are new to us. Then I know it's like our kids, right? When they can teach it, we know they've got it. So that's the hope. I'll be honest. There are times when I still am thinking like, okay, do I need to pivot and start again and figure out another way? But I try in situations of change to give myself 3 to 5 years in things so that I, as the leader, don't let myself back out too quick. Because sometimes you're right there when it feels like it's getting the hardest and the heaviest. You're right at the peak of the mountain and you're about to go downhill. And downhill is good in that scenario. That seems weird, but
yeah, no, I got it. So, you know what though? It's such a powerful statement there, that you are always going uphill and you never know when it plateaus or starts to go down, and you have to keep having that drive. And that decision that you're making to give it 3 to 5 years is the perfect segue into our next bold decision making segment. And one of our last elements, we'll talk about the fire element. Ignite your ideas, face the flames. This is Spark or Burn, where we talk about bold decisions, big risks, and the fires that either spark success or burn lessons into our memory. So Brittany, can you tell us about a bold decision that you've had to make and why it was a risk to you?
My bold decision was changing campuses. I had a lot of the work at the lower campus, and we were doing really well and we were rocking and rolling, and we had some things happen in the district, and my superintendent approached me and asked me if I would think about coming to the middle school. It was a risk for me because elementary was where I was comfortable. I had taught middle school before, but I had never been an administrator at a secondary level campus. There is so much more to it than I was even aware of. My oldest daughter had just come to the middle school, and I was kind of worried about how she would feel about all of a sudden me crashing her fun. She just got rid of me, and now here I am again. And I also had another child that was on the elementary campus that I didn't necessarily want to leave. And so the mom part of me struggled with that. But then also, there's always the thought of, gosh, what if I get over there and I don't like it, or it's not a good fit, or it's too much and I can't keep up, or I don't know enough about it to make effective change. So it felt like a very, very, very bold move. My ultimate goal is to continue to move up in education, but that was not my timeline. I really thought that I would be at the elementary level for another, well until my kids were out of elementary, and I have a 2-year-old. So I had expected to be there for quite a while. So it was a big change. And when you connect with a campus, the next hard part is telling them that you've made the decision for the big change. So I knew all of that was ahead of me. There was a lot of learning ahead of me, but I talked about it with my husband and prayed about it. And I just felt like, man, if not now, when? And if the opportunity presents itself and it feels right, then jump in. And it's honestly been the best decision. I don't know that I'll ever leave middle school. I love it here. I love the age. The kids are hysterical and they can take the joking back like elementary can't sometimes.
Sometimes they
sometimes. That's true. But it's a lot easier to pinpoint who can and who can't. Because students are becoming more self-aware at this age, which is really fun to watch. But yeah, it was a hard decision. It really was.
So with that, you talked about thinking it over, talking it through, praying about it. What was the spark behind it? What made you say, I just have to go for it?
I honestly wondered, if I pass up this opportunity, when will the opportunity present itself again? I knew I wanted to stay in this district. I love my school district. My kids love where we are. And so then I wondered, like, okay, am I closing a door that won't come back open for me? And then there was also the piece of me that always can come back to bite me, but the curiosity of it was just enough to drive me to want to try. I like a challenge. Like I said, I knew academically I was walking into a campus that was solid, but we had some culture things to work on, and I love that. That's like my thing. So I couldn't resist it. I just couldn't. I got to the point where I thought, yep, I'm gonna do it.
What was at stake for you if it didn't work out? If you had gone there and it was horrible, was this an all or nothing type of moment?
For me, it was, because it's very important to me to love what I do. I think it makes me a better leader if I love what I do. It makes me a better mom and wife. I would come home completely unhappy every day, but that's always kind of in the back of your mind. I think when you start any new position or go to any new place is, gosh, if I hate it, how long do I stay before I determine, this is really, or do you just hate it because it's different and it's change? Or is it truly not fulfilling to you? And so that is always scary, especially as a married woman who has children. So, my husband and I both work. And so I contribute to the household income just like he does. And so there's all of these things flying around in your head. Like, man, if this doesn't work, I'm going to put us in a lurch a little bit till I find something that does work, So it's heavy, but it worked. And I lucked out.
You know what, though? I don't know if it's luck or if you made your own future here and you made your own scenario, because you rooted it in that idea of, you knew you were having to take on much responsibility. We go back to your grounding earth moment, right? So you knew you had to give much to make it work. And so you put the work in, and based off of what you said earlier, you probably would have been willing to give it a 3 to 5 year span. And if you're putting the work in, that makes that a much easier decision to hopefully see the payoff, see the change. And because you're rooted in putting relationships first, it becomes an easier transition. It would be a very different conversation if you weren't meant for that job, right? And that's not to say that you would have never been. Somebody who does not build relationships effectively, somebody that does not put much work in, that's not the right person for the job. So it's a good hiring process on the team by shoulder tapping you to say, hey, you should consider this. But also for you to build the character you are to go in and be successful in that moment and in any situation, regardless of where it is, because as a leader that you are, you can work in almost any probable organization or setting. And if you're working with people, you'll be okay because you know what you value. And that's the important part behind it. So with that, though, that is a big change to decide to uproot and go to a different location for work. How would you encourage the listeners to also consider making that bold decision and help them along the way with that process?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the question you asked me earlier, is just, what is your purpose? And mine is to, foster relationships with teachers and be supportive for teachers. So for me, that was the ultimate question. Am I still getting to fulfill what is meaningful to me, what I'm passionate about? And so that would be my recommendation is, does the job or the change align to what your personal mission and vision is, what your personal passion is? Because if it's not, it would just be very ungratifying. I don't know how that could work. It would be exhausting, frankly.
Yeah.
To go somewhere where you're doing something that just has no fulfillment at all.
And that's what leads to burnout, right? Is people often don't root what they're trying to take home as a paycheck to something that they love doing.
Right.
That's where you hear about teacher burnout. You hear about issues with that's a system problem in its own, but it's also an individual problem in pursuing something not rooted in their personal value and what they want to aspire to do.
I think in education a lot, we're in the middle of a big teacher shortage, and that's everywhere, I think. And so we're getting a lot of professional people coming in that haven't necessarily gone through school to be teachers. And there have been a few that have come and they've stuck out the year. And at the end, they've said, like, this is nothing that I thought it would be. So I think that that's part of it too. And, you know, to try to validate that, when I hear that, I'm never mad about that change. I'm grateful that they see that this is just not what they're cut out to do. But in a big change, like that's one of the dangers. So you have to do your research too to make sure it is something that is meaningful to you.
Off script here a little bit, and just a tangent on that too. I think if I was to give advice to anybody that's thinking about an education field, and for all of those not in education listening, just bear with me for a moment, because this also does apply to you, and I'll get to how it does in a second here. People don't realize, and I often hear this from not teachers that I'm with right now, but teachers in the past, that I didn't realize that I would have to wipe boogers or deal with tears or deal with X, Y, Z all day. Like, that's not what I'm here for as a teacher. I'm here to take the program of study and teach it to kids. And I'm like, well, if your job is to teach the program of study, you're covering 1/7 of your job, to be honest with you. And, you know, people that get into education actually do get into it to work with kids and to build effective relationships, bringing it back to point number one on all of our leadership quality standards, teacher quality standards. You have to assume that your job is more than just standing up there, sage on the stage, talking, presenting, giving instruction. And any job that you go into, whether or not you're a plumber, an electrician, whether you're in the marketing side of things, whether you're a broker or a trader or, you know, an entrepreneur of some way, shape or form, whatever you intend your business to be about, there's probably 6 to 10 other things that your business is also about that you have to deal with as well. And it's about fully understanding that and buying in, not just to the one thing that you want to do, but all of the other 10 things that are entailed within it that leads you to sustain your momentum and be okay with your momentum forward. I knew getting into leadership that my sole job was not managing the budget of my school. I knew getting into leadership that my sole job was not writing teachers up if they're bad, right? We go in with these assumptions, and you have to see the whole picture before you make that decision. So with that, my final tip for people on decision-making process is take the time to unpack everything that it could entail and make it an informed decision. Don't just make a decision on a whim. Make an informed decision. And your gut can still help you inform that decision. Just make sure you have some information.
Absolutely.
Okay. I do not have a segment yet to play for our last section here. And I told the person that I interviewed before this that I would create one, and I didn't. So I dropped the ball a little bit. But we are moving on to listener questions where they've asked and we're going to answer. It's time for listener questions. And the one that I'm going to bring up to the discussion today is from another person in the States, but I'll do my best to not expose where they are or anything like that in case they wanted to keep this a bit more personal to them. How can you inspire a leader who seems uninspired when it's their job to do the inspiring?
Lots of inspires there. How do you inspire a leader who is uninspired, but it's their job to do the inspiring?
My initial thought is you have the wrong mindset. And where I'm going to go with this is don't get me wrong. A leader's job is to be a system of support.
Yes.
But if you're writing them off and saying that is their only job and it's not your responsibility as well, there needs to be a level of accountability as a team.
Listen, you need to say that louder for the people in the back.
Not to the individual specifically that wrote this, but if you're talking a school system, you need teachers lifting teachers up. You need teachers lifting your principal up. You need your support staff lifting teachers and your principal up. And you need kids lifting people up. There has been days where I've gone to my workplace and my teachers have picked up my slack for the day. You know, I have 2 kids under 3 right now as well. There's days where I'm going to work tired. There's days where, you know, you're leaving everything that you try to possibly leave at the door, but you're still going in with a little bit of, I need some help today. Now, the hard part to that is being in a position of vulnerability to say, I need some help from the team to pick up the slack. Because the other thing that I would share in answering this question is people are not mind readers. And so this leader that you have, this principal that you have, this person that you have in this position where you're asking this question from, are they aware that they're not inspiring people? Because they might.
That's culture.
And they might go home every day thinking they've done a fantastic job. Or you know what? Another step further, they probably go home every day feeling like they did the best job they can.
Right.
Because if they didn't, they would make it known. Now, if they're making it known, this is a whole other system. It's not your job to hire and fire this person. You maybe need to look at channels going higher up and saying, we are having an issue here as a group. We need some help. We want to come together as a team and make this the best we possibly can. However, you also need to approach it of, we need to raise awareness as step one. Mm-hmm. We need to be all a part of the solution as step two.
Yeah. And
what's your take on this?
I could not agree more. As a teacher, I worked on a campus where there were some fellow teachers who we lovingly referred to as vampires because all they ever did was just suck the joy out of things.
I thought you were going to say shine and sparkle, but that's more of a Twilight reference. So
yeah, not so much Twilight. I'm talking about like the old 90s vampires.
Yep, I'm with you.
So, and I just remember as a teacher feeling bad for my administration because they often would try to do, not just morale boosting things like, I don't know, Sonic drinks. We'll go back to that. But they tried to give us extra time for planning and all of this. And it sometimes just seemed like it didn't matter. So on that side of it, you do have some people that it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how you do it. They're, for whatever reason, going through something or just unhappy where they are. And so they don't feel inspired and therefore they feel like their administration's not doing their job. As an administrator, I was given the advice by a friend who is a superintendent in another district. She said, always find people on your team that will be honest about the pulse on the campus. Because I feel like being out and about and having conversations every day does a lot of that work for me. I feel like I can tell if something feels off or if people are unhappy. But there are times where, as you said, I come in because my daughter's been up all night and I'm a zombie and I need somebody to help me check in on that kind of area. So your admin team is really important, I think, to have a really good chemistry with your assistant principal or with your counselor. Your front office knows so much about what's happening on the campus. They are invaluable. I love them. But then also, I think it goes back to building a relationship with your administrator. I think that sometimes, and I have worked for admin before, that there's like a wall between the admin and the teachers because they don't want to cross a professional line. Like, you can't be my friend because I'm your boss, when that's not at all what people are asking for. I feel like what they're asking for is just conversation, validation of, you're my coworker and I might be organizationally your boss, but we're in this together, man. Like we're doing this job together.
Both are humans. Yep.
Yes. And
Absolutely.
I did, my daughter got RSV right before Christmas, and I'll just wrap up with this and then I'll be done. I'm sorry, I talk a whole lot.
This is great.
And it was hard. We had a lot of sleepless nights. My husband and I were just trading off who was going to take off work that day to stay home with her. And so I came in and a teacher came in to bring me some paperwork that she had to turn in for something. Anyway, before she left, she stopped and she said, "And how are you doing?" And that meant so much to me because I feel like that's what I do all day, every day. And so when a teacher reciprocates that, man, I feel like, okay, we're doing the right thing. We are building this campus together. This is not a me and them thing. This is an us thing. And so the inspiring is a lot easier to do when you're doing it together, when they look at it as a two-way street. It's not just us serving them, but they're in that way serving us. They're treating us as their coworkers and not as their superiors, So I'm this poor person that wrote the question, probably didn't even mean it like that, but that's kind of how I look at it. That's culture. That's culture. That is a culture of collaboration when you can work on doing the inspiring together and not look at it as what can you give me today to help me want to do my job?
Yeah. And so many, I'm going to say there's so many elements to this that we could unpack with it. We also have no idea on the context to this did this person used to inspire and did something happen where they're now not motivated to inspire and they're actually just pulling back from their job because of other things that could have happened in their life. And if that's the case too, the answer doesn't really change. The answer stays the same. And, you know, I had a literacy coach actually say it best: stay in your lane. What can you control? What can you be accountable for? And part of your lane in being a team is raising awareness with your team.
Yeah.
Right. And they talk a lot about if it was something external that has changed the way this person is motivated in the workplace, that conversation needs to happen.
Right.
Something is different. I've noticed this.
Right.
What can we do together to make it better? Right. And there's so much power in that conversation, and approach it with love and approach it with caution. And I'm sure if you approach it with vulnerability, they would be receptive to at least entertaining the conversation. Or
absolutely,
you've now raised the awareness to them that somebody has noticed things are different.
Right.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they do feel like they're putting on the happy face and coming to work, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. So with that, you know what, listeners, I hope that answers one of the questions that we tried to unpack. Every time we have a guest, please continue to send questions. I love getting to unpack them with you. It leads to such great conversation. And if this helped you in any way, shape, or form, reach out. Send me a DM on Instagram, email tyler@elementaleducator.com, and connect with me and let me know how that helped with you in any situation you might be in. Brittany, as we wrap up, what is one message that you wish everybody listening could take away with them?
That teachers do the most impossibly hard job. And as administrators, the worst thing that we could ever do is forget that they are people first. They are mothers. They are sisters. They are wives. They are daughters. They are sons. They are husbands. They are brothers. They are people. And this job is heavy. And with the climate that we're in right now, it feels like it's getting heavier. And if we don't support the people who are passionate about serving our kids, we're going to lose something really important. And I think that it takes a lot to give teachers what they need. And we need to be trying harder.
Very well put.
So thank you, teachers.
Thank you to teachers.
That's how I could have wrapped that up. Thank you.
Thank you, all service. All service. Yeah. Now, with that, Brittany, if people want to hear more of your story, get in touch, what is the best way for our audience to connect with you?
So I have an Instagram. It's The Preoccupied Principal. I also have under the same name on Facebook. And then my email is thepreoccupiedprincipal@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And alchemists, as we wrap up our episode, I just want to take a moment and share my appreciation for your listenership. You're the reason we're here. You're the inspiration for the show. And I hope our journey today sparked some points of interest for you. To dive deeper, make sure to subscribe to our monthly newsletter for scholarly insights, actionable strategies, and in-depth analysis of each episode. Just reach out on our Instagram for the link. And Brittany, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to connect, collaborate, and empower us through your lived experience.
Thank you for having me. I loved it.
You've been listening to The Elemental Educator. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Elemental Educator.